Brought to you by...
I'm not even sure where to begin with this one. I've tried to make it clear since the early days of this channel that I don't really follow current events. I don't really follow recent crimes or anything of that nature. I guess one place I could begin would be, we do know that just because something terrible happens in the world doesn't mean that we have to incorporate it into movies. Right? Hello friends, and welcome back to ETF. While out apartment hunting, college pals Noelle and Addie stumble upon the deal of a lifetime. A posh duplex on Manhattan's Upper East Side. But soon after moving in, a more sinister picture of the apartment emerges when a mysterious woman arrives and claims that the property used to belong to the infamous and recently deceased Jeffrey Epstein. With this news, Noelle becomes obsessed with the visitor, to the point of infatuation. As the pair plunge deeper into the conspiracies of the Epstein case, Addie falls into her own bizarre state. A pseudo-possession, complete with inexplicable fits of age-regressed sexual mania. As they peel back these strange occurrences, the truth reveals itself to be far more twisted than they could have ever imagined. Within the opening seconds of the film, it becomes immediately apparent that we are in for another attempt to emulate the films of the past, as we are introduced to the neon-soaked opening titles, overlaid with heavy 70s grain and film scratches. However, here I have to say that the technique is done very well, and refrains from being too heavy-handed in any way. As we're introduced to our central protagonists, a pair of young women hunting for an apartment, it reminded me a bit of the opening moments of Ty West's House of the Devil. The way that the film is shot does attempt to maintain that 70s horror aesthetic, keeping the camera mostly locked down and utilizing some tense, slow zooms that are enhanced by its eerie score. Not all elements of the film lean into the period feeling, though. As they mentioned early on, that our blonde aspiring actress makes self-tape auditions on her phone. However, they don't really draw too much attention to technology, so it doesn't pull you out of the atmosphere that the film is trying to establish. Another thing that this one gets right is the flat look of the lighting and color palette. Many times when you watch a film from the 70s, it feels muted and dull or overly washed out. We get a similar effect here, where it almost seems as though the filmmakers didn't even color correct the raw footage, but it adds to the style well. The characters here are written in a very strange fashion. We have our blonde Addie, who clearly suffers from some sort of separation anxiety, nightmares, and the performances aren't the strongest that I've ever seen. In fact, most of them feel hollow and devoid of emotion or range of any kind, giving the movie a strange student film vibe that kind of hurts the experience. The hard part was trying to decipher whether or not this was done intentionally to deliver that cheesy 70s feeling. We get an appearance here from Dasha Nekrasova. I've never really known how to say her name. She was also the director of this film, who I had previously seen in Softness of Bodies, which was an interesting character study that you can check out my thoughts on here. This film chooses to utilize the real factual Jeff Epstein case as the building blocks of the narrative, playing on real tragedy to craft its fictional plot. Personally, I feel like this choice is somewhat in poor taste, considering that those wounds are still quite fresh in society. I personally would have just created a similar story with different names and altered ideas. It starts to become incredibly clear that this film is populated by incredibly disturbed and mentally fractured characters, as we watch our two drugged-out sleuths attempt to prove that Epstein didn't kill himself, one of which tying her neck to the wall and strangling herself while the other watches emotionlessly. all while we see the roommate wandering the streets in a fugue state and masturbating against the door of a church. It only gets weirder from there as she goes full-blown madhouse with basically every following scene. This is where the film became kind of messy for me, and I started to struggle with remaining interested. We begin jumping back and forth between the batshit roommate and our team of cracked out amateur detectives, both of which are fucked in the heads in their own ways. The film sends us on a twisted psychosexual tangent into the dark and supernatural. It's uncomfortably strange, brutally depraved, and oddly relevant to very real-world trauma. However, it doesn't quite make it clear whether our characters are suffering the effects of some sort of dark force or haunting, or if they're just severely mentally broken from the very beginning, which maybe is the point. I'm giving The Scary of 61st a D. I can understand the intent behind the film, and I think the technical filmmaking is sound, but I personally just didn't enjoy this one the way I hoped I would. It fell short for me, but I don't think that should prevent you from giving it a chance. Maybe you'll find something haunting this one that I didn't.